Hi guys, welcome to Mark and Jack. I'm Adrian and today we're in West London, South Kensington. Over here is a science museum. If you're interested in watches, visiting London, check this place out because it has an amazing offering for watches. Let's go have a look. So the last time I visited the Science Museum was probably around 3 years ago. And when I did so, they had this huge room dedicated to wristwatches, and everything was in chronological order. So you could see the whole kind of change from manual wind to automatic, to then quartz, to then people coming back to automatic and mechanical movements. But it was fascinating to see that whole journey. All of that stuff's gone. They've blocked off that room now, and it's being redone for some silly other topic. But they do still have the majority of the history. And as this notice board says, these guys have the oldest clock and watch museum in the world, which is really quite cool. I'm not going to go into detail around the pieces that you're going to see here, simply because I don't want to ruin it for those who are going to visit, but also I'm simply not going to give it justice. But they do have some incredibly old pieces like this iron clock. It's quite amazing how raw this thing is. Apparently this would have been painted bright colours back in the day, back in the 15th century, but now it is just plain iron. And it's actually held together by these tiny wedges, which is quite amazing. It's quite incredible what people have been able to do with very little knowledge and very little experience, and imagine very few tools. This thing is sensational. People talk about wristwatches being pieces of art. This is genuinely a piece of art. It was made in Augsburg in 1625, and it's an astronomical clock made by Johann Schneider. So it has a traditional, or what we see now as traditional, and then it was probably relatively new, but it has a 12-hour dial, and around the outside it has a year calendar. It's got the saint's name for each day of the year. Now it's quite funny whenever people comment on the micro brand watches that I sometimes review, and they say, oh, this is just ripping off this or that. Well, as we go through here, you'll be able to see where other brands who are seen as pushing the envelope are just simply stealing off what has been done before. For example, this clock has an open case back. They had a whole bunch of long case clocks. These things are beautiful. I absolutely I love the sound of them. The big old clunking as the pendulum goes back and forth and all the cogs are clicking together. Really satisfying sounds. This one was made by Thomas Crickenden in York in 1685. The case is made of oak and it is veneered in walnut and olive wood. The movement has a power reserve of 8 days. It's still ticking and it's still keeping time, which is pretty damn impressive. One thing that I really enjoy about museums and seeing old pieces is recognizing names and seeing where the journey perhaps started, or certainly towards the beginning of where the journey started. This is a painting of the John Arnold family. So we know them now as Arnold and Son, making and selling very high-end watches. But this is where it started with John Arnold. This is a painting of John Arnold Sr. showing John Arnold Jr. a pocket watch movement. Now, interestingly, Arnold and Sons recognize themselves as a Swiss watch brand, where they clearly started in London. This beautiful piece was made by John Arnold in 1776 in London. Quite rightly, this piece is showing off the movement because it is stunning. Not only is the mechanics beautiful, but just the etching, the engraving that they've done within the gold case is absolutely stunning. Again, this thing's a piece of art. It's got an enamel dial, lovely amount of detail on the dial. This piece is my favorite out of what I'm going to show today. This is from 1899, so getting quite close to where we are now. And again, it's by a British brand, Smith & Son. They're probably more recognized now for their World War II military watches, but it's quite amazing what they're doing here with this piece. So here we have an enamel dial with subdials for the seconds. We have moon phase, we've got perpetual calendar, we've got minute repeater, and we have a split seconds chronograph. Really quite an amazing piece. They've got a huge amount of marine chronometers, and they talk about the whole history about how these came about and they were developed, and at what point were they kind of recognized as reliable tools for navigation and timekeeping. This one is just amazing, and I'd really quite like to own one of these one day. Just I don't know where you'd put it. The whole clock is suspended in this kind of gimbal, so it can move in different axes. Obviously, as the ship's moving about, that would probably damage the movement, but certainly make it run irregularly. So this helps kind of keep the clock upright and in a single position. Really quite a clever idea. There's not much known about this piece. As the little bit of information about it is just full of speculation. The museum thinks it's from France and London, so it's a bit of a connection between the two. And they also think it's from the 18th century. But I wanted to include it because it's quite interesting with the orrery section at the top within the glass globe. So it's got these tiny little marble-like things predicting where the planet's going to be within the solar system. Dotted all around this whole section are tiny little bits of movements, unfinished movements, and kind of people trying to figure out what is the best way of doing things, and different designs as well. So you've got the designs of the hands and everything. People exploring different kind of spring shapes. It's really quite interesting. So let's jump into the 20th century, and what better than a topic that is quite close to me, because I love the Explorer, but also really quite contentious as well. This is Sir Edmund Hillary at the top of Mount Everest. Now, if you talk to Rolex, they'll tell you that Sir Edmund Hillary scaled Mount Everest wearing a Rolex Oyster Perpetual, which later became the Rolex Explorer. If you talk to Smiths, then they would say that no, Sir Edmund Hillary was wearing this Smith's watch. Hodinkee, I'll put a link to this article. Hodinkee have done an article when they found the actual Rolex that Rolex claims Sir Edmund Hillary wore up the mountain. But then you can quite clearly see here in this little plaque that this is the Smith's watch that Sir Edmund Hillary wore. It's a contentious issue, but ultimately no one really knows. But this watch was on Sir Edmund Hillary's person as he was climbing the mountain, which is quite cool. And it is actually a really cool looking watch. So the cogfather of watchmaking, certainly for our generation, has a little shrine to himself. He has quite a large section of this kind of exhibition. And quite rightly. George Daniels is the most impactful watchmaker that there's been in our generation. He's certainly the most decorated. Now, if you're unfamiliar with George Daniels, he invented the coaxial movement. Now, if you're unfamiliar with George Daniels, he invented the coaxial movement. If you're not familiar with the coaxial movement, if you're wearing an Omega, look down at it and it might say coaxial on the dial. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the coaxial movement and why it's so special, I understand it, but not to a level to be able to explain it well enough. Ultimately, the end goal of what George Daniels created meant that there was a lot less lubrication required in the escapement of a movement, meaning that a movement could last a lot longer. I'm going to talk about this chap in a second, Roger Smith, but I'll put a link in the description as well for a YouTube video from Hodinkee where they talk to Roger Smith and he talks about the George Daniels and the coaxial movement and why it's so special. He's obviously far better at talking about this stuff than I am. Here's a Patek Philippe Nautilus with the coaxial movement inside. When George Daniels created the coaxial, he went straight to Patek to try and get them to buy into the idea but alas, they ended up not. I mean, I'll let Roger Smith talk about it because he talks about it in quite a lot of detail. It's absolutely fascinating. And one of George Daniels' own pieces. Go watch the Hodinkee video talking watches with Roger Smith. He is an amazing watchmaker. There's a lot of information about him on YouTube. And basically, he was an apprentice to George Daniels, and he's kind of carried on George Daniels' legacy, but actually improving the coaxial movement as well, taking it to like the next level. And his pieces are sensational. Follow him on Instagram as well. He often posts really beautiful processes of how he creates these lovely dials. It's really quite amazing, and he's actually really quite good at responding to DMs, which is quite nice of him. So here are just a few random other bits and pieces. I love machinery. I love cogs and shit. I never understand what they do, but there's something in it that I just love. Engines, cogs, mechanical stuff. As you go through these pieces, it's quite amazing to see how important London and England as a whole was within the whole evolution of watchmaking and clockmaking. It played a really big role in the development of what happened within watches. And that's quite cool. If you're in London, do go check out this place because it is fascinating. I learned a lot, and I imagine a lot of people would learn a lot as well coming here. Great for kids as well. There's loads of stuff for kids to play around with. Just don't forget that you have a family, because last time I took my wife here, my wife won't come back to this museum with me because apparently I went missing for a good hour and a half because it's a bit ironic that you lose track of time when you're surrounded by clocks and watches. So guys, there's my video on the Science Museum in West London. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the subscribe button in one of the corners, hit the thumbs up button, and check me on Instagram @BarkhamJack. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.